Evaluating information would be simpler if it were only choosing between true and false information, or even separating between fact, opinion, and fiction. Most research isn't as straightforward as fact-finding. The more important thing to know is how to evaluate information for a specific need. Information could be perfectly acceptable in one situation and completely inappropriate in another. When you're evaluating information, you are deciding whether it is useful for you, not whether it is inherently good or bad. One of the first things you want to do when you come across a source is determine its audience and purpose. There are clues within the source to help you determine this. What is it published in? Magazines and newspapers like Time Magazine and the Wall Street Journal are often written to the general public, or if it's a smaller newspaper, like the West Hawaii Today, to a local community. If you see a newsletter or magazine put out by an organization, you can safely assume it's written to members of the organization. For example, the Columbia City Ballet newsletter is written for people who attend or are interested in ballet near Columbia, South Carolina. The source could also be written to a more specialized audience, such as scholars or a specific profession. An article in the Journal of Organic Chemistry is primarily written to those who practice organic chemistry research, whereas the Journal of Chemical Education is geared more towards those who teach chemistry. If you're ever unsure of the audience, the publication's website usually includes this information in the About section. Once you know the audience, you have a clue about the purpose. The purpose of a source is why it was written. Most authors don't write for writing's sake. They are trying to accomplish something. Sometimes the author comes right out and says what the purpose of their writing is. Other times, you have to figure it out by thinking about the audience and what the author has written. Is it written to help professionals stay up to date and get better at their job, like this nursing management article? To inform, like this article on the element mercury from the Environmental Encyclopedia? To demonstrate how to do something, like this book on how to form a nonprofit corporation? To entertain, like this Entertainment Weekly article with Stephen Colbert as Gandalf? Like this Keep the Electoral College commentary? If you can't tell from the title whether an author is trying to persuade you, look at the conclusion. Does it advocate a certain action or point of view? After you determine the purpose, now's a good opportunity to decide if you want to spend more time on the source by reading it in full. If the article's purpose is to examine the content of professional athletes' tweets, and you're looking for information on how sports fans use social media to create community, move on to another source that is more likely to fit your need. Whether a source fits your information need or not is evaluating its relevance. When determining relevance, think about what the article is useful for. If the article looks like it matches your need, you can move on to the rest of the evaluation. Something else to consider is when the source was written. The age of a source in relation to your information need is called currency. Currency is more important in some fields than others. Think about it. Unless we've uncovered new volumes, a book analyzing the diaries of George Washington, written in 1970, is still perfectly acceptable to use. George Washington's diary hasn't changed any since 1799 when he died. But currency can be the main determining factor of a source's usefulness in other disciplines. A book on how to use Office 2013 may only be a year or two old, but it isn't helpful when you're trying to learn Office 2015. The medical field is another example. It is always changing as new discoveries are found and research conducted, so newer sources are crucial. Yet sometimes older sources are what you're looking for. What if you're researching how doctors were educated in the 1700s? A textbook from 1708 would fit your need perfectly, even though you're researching the topic of medicine. Or what if you're researching flags of the Revolutionary War? Artwork depicting flags from 1775 would be just the thing. Newer information isn't always better. It depends on what you want to use the information for. Another criteria to consider is authority. But what is an authority? An authority is someone or something that you trust will be knowledgeable. When you go to the doctor, you have confidence that person knows enough about the human body to make an authoritative decision about your health. If the doctor feels it is outside their expertise, they will send you to a specialist, such as an allergist or heart surgeon, who you trust to know more about a particular illness or part of the body. Where does that trust come from? Unless you have a family doctor you've seen since you were little, or just happen to know a good cardiologist, chances are you haven't met your doctor before entrusting them with your health. As a society, we give doctors authority based on education, experience, and title. Medical school has a reputation for being rigorous, and entrance into it is competitive. Specialists have more authority on their specialty because they went through more specific schooling and have more experience with patients that have similar problems. And authority could also be based on the school a doctor went to. Someone who went to Harvard Medical School is typically considered more authoritative than someone who went to Drexel University. In truth, though, how many of you check where your doctor went to school before agreeing to see them? Or are you more likely to go to a doctor your friend or relative had a good experience with? Reputation is also a factor when evaluating authority. Recently, patient reviews have become a part of determining the authority of a particular doctor. On many medical practice websites, there are patient comments on how effective the doctor was at treating their issue, how quickly they were seen, or how well the doctor listened to their problems before making judgments. People can then make decisions on whether to see that doctor based on their job performance from the perspective of patients. Now what if you're trying to decide which restaurant to eat at tonight? Would the doctor be your go-to for determining the best place to eat? Probably not. What about the chef at the restaurant? Also unlikely. For a restaurant, you are more likely to ask a friend with a reputation for choosing good places to eat, or consult reviews on Yelp or Urban Spoon. Unless you have a specific need, like a food allergy. Then authority shifts to the app or website that is best at picking out restaurants who accommodate your allergy. The point here is that authority is contextual. It changes based on what your need is. Let's think about George Washington again. If you're looking for the cause of his death, there are several types of authority you could refer to. There is Washington's personal secretary, Tobias Lear, who was present throughout Washington's illness and at his deathbed. Tobias was an eyewitness to the event and spoke to Washington often during the illness, making his accounts of Washington's death authoritative. There is the modern-day presidential historian, who is familiar with all the documents and perspectives that provide evidence of the illness leading up to Washington's death. The presidential historian is also likely to have an advanced degree, giving them subject expertise in how to interpret the evidence surrounding the event. Or a different kind of subject expert could be a medical doctor, who could look at the historical accounts and talk about Washington's illness from the point of view of modern medicine. Now, what if you're looking at Washington's political strategy? Someone with a PhD in political science or a public official who has first-hand experience in developing political strategy would be better authorities to consult than a medical doctor. Keep in mind that each of these authorities has a different point of view and might come to contrasting conclusions that you will have to weigh when deciding your own point of view. There is rarely one definitive answer when it comes to research. The final criteria for evaluation is credibility. Whether you believe the information in a source or not is partially tied to the author and that author's authority. If you found a high school English paper using Google, would you trust the information you found in it? Probably not, because a high schooler isn't likely to know enough about the topic yet to be credible. What if a politician is caught lying on several occasions? How likely are you to believe the next thing they say? Not likely. What if a researcher produces skewed results or misrepresents sources? That affects their credibility. You determine credibility by reading sources closely, checking for accuracy of the information the author presents or cites, and finding out more about the author's credentials and reputation. Publications have reputations for credibility too. The New York Times has a reputation for accuracy as a newspaper, while The Star has a reputation for sensational journalism, released before all the facts are straight. So even if what you're reading has no author, you can make decisions about credibility based on the publication. After considering the audience, purpose, relevance, currency, authority, and credibility of a source, whether you use it or not depends on your information need. That high school English paper would not be appropriate to cite as an authority to back up an argument. But it would be an ideal example if you're demonstrating common misunderstandings high school students have about writing. A press release given by a less than truthful politician isn't what you want to base your decision on who to vote for in the upcoming election. But it could be useful if you are analyzing campaign strategies the official used to get elected in the first place. Sources are not good or bad in and of themselves. The key is to evaluate them in terms of your specific research context. Evaluating sources in context will ensure you use the most appropriate ones for your specific research project.